take the Christian symbol, the cross, and as his symbol, and that they would win the battle, which they were about to fight. So he did that. He had that put on the shields and so forth of his army, and they won. It was the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. So Constantine, in seeing that, then came to believe in the Christian God, and therefore ended official Roman persecution of the Christians. Now, Christians didn't, up until then, they would have mass. It was common in Roman houses of the time to have a little chapel for the Roman gods and goddesses. Christians began to use those as little churches where they would secretly gather and celebrate the Eucharist. At times, they would go down into the catacombs, which were Roman graveyards, and celebrate Mass there near the tombs of the martyrs. One pope, actually, was doing that very thing when it was found out he was martyred, along with his deacons, right then and there. So it was kind of dangerous. But when persecution ended, now all of a sudden the Christians can openly practice their faith. So this is the time that the grand churches started to go up. St. Peter's Basilica, St. Paul's, St. Mary Major, and all these glorious buildings, these churches, began to be built. And faith came out into the open. However, what now began to happen was that no longer being persecuted, Christians, the church went through a period where it was really solidifying what we believe. And how it happened was there were some people who popped up with different ideas. For example, it became a fairly widespread belief that Jesus wasn't really divine. He wasn't really God. He wasn't equal to God the Father. He was, a pretty good guy, but he was less than. Okay? There was other people who got this idea, well, Jesus wasn't really human. And so that's not what the church had believed and what had been revealed to them. But some people really persisted in this belief, and when that happens, that's what's known as a heresy. So the church, seeing the need to combat these things, began to solidify and to write down more what it is that we actually believe. This was done a lot through convening bishops into what we call a general council. Talk about it. Say, well, guys, what are we going to do here? Okay? And so, for example, this then is the time period where we get the Nicene Creed, for example, which you have some familiarity with now. That came from the council in Nicaea in 325. That was of this time that I'm talking about. Okay? Questions, comments, so forth. Okay. Along in the 5th century, the northern tribes, known as the barbarians, kind of a derogatory term, began to become more powerful and hold sway against the Romans, and they would eventually bring the fall of the Roman Empire. And so now they've got all these other folks who are flooding into and the Roman Empire was rather vast still at this point. It covered quite an area. So now you've got all these other barbarians flooding into the Roman Empire, and they were not Christians. And so the church had a new challenge as to, well, what to do with them. Well, they did eventually convert over time, a lot of them, and they became Christianized. By this point in history, though, there were some things that had grown a little lax, and, some people, you know how it is, they tended to abuse a few things. And so one of the popes, it was Gregory I at the time, he saw the need that, we really need to clean some stuff up here. So he instituted a great reform of the church, and this has happened periodically throughout history. That's kind of the way human nature is. Like a pendulum, swing over here for a while, and no, swing back over here for a while, and you just keep swinging. In a way, back and forth. We kind of get off the path, and then certain folks and people have seen that and said, well, no, we got to clean this up. We're getting too far afield here. And so they did. Get us back on track again. Okay. The next thing of note that I guess I would touch on is up until the 11th century, it was all one church. There were no different denominations or anything. It was all Christian. It was all Catholic. But the first split happens in the year 1054, and that's when became known as the Orthodox Church. They are the first ones to split away from the Catholic Church. And it was basically over the authority of the Pope. They didn't recognize that. And a little theological difference about the Holy Spirit. I won't go into detail. But that split remains. Now, a little over 1,000 years later, that's not been resolved. There is still an Orthodox Church. Okay? But they are the closest to us of any that's ever split away from us. They are definitely the most close in belief and practice and theology. Okay? So as you get into the 12th, 13th, and 14th centuries, what was going on, particularly in European society at the time. This was the height of feudalism. Where there's lords and vassals and all that stuff. And you have to understand that it's not like what we're accustomed to in the United States with this separation of church and state. It wasn't that way. It was all wound up together. And so naturally there were some abuses that began to creep in. Some powerful lords and nobles began to seize the power to appoint who becomes a bishop, for example. At other times, maybe the Pope overstepped his bounds a bit in telling different rulers what they ought to be doing. So it went a little both ways. And so lo and behold, there's always something that comes along that brings about the needed reform. And so it's this period in history that gives rise to what's known as mendicant orders. Okay, so for example, this is the time period in which St. Francis of Assisi lived and St. Dominic. And they were two that founded mendicant. What that means, St. Francis was actually of pretty noble birth himself, and he renounced his inheritance and his wealth and his position because he heard a call from God, and he embraced poverty. He literally lived in the streets and begged for his food. He felt called to do that.